Does the Nintendo Switch still hold up? That, my dear viewers, is a tricky question. Let's look back at the Switch's library, hardware, and all its limitations that came with it. And let's decide for ourselves. Is the Switch still worth it, and does it hold up? Let's go back to 2016. The Wii U was Nintendo's current hot, steaming, burning pile of dog shit. They had to make sure their next home console was a success. So when the Nintendo Switch was announced, it was definitely met with confusion, no doubt. People were confused by the portable / home console hybrid. And as they should, they just came off of the Wii U generation, they were gonna have their doubts. The Switch sales-wise did well at launch, and the one game that especially helped with those sales was The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. That game was a massive deal. Not only did it innovate the Zelda series in a very, very great way, but it was honestly just a perfect game to launch the Switch with. Breath of the Wild is the kind of game you could get thousands of hours from and you would still be having fun. If Breath of the Wild wasn't there at launch, the Switch would have been pathetic at first. Looking at the rest of the launch lineup, while there was stuff to play, Breath of the Wild was the main star here. And 7 years later, you could really see how Breath of the Wild shook up the gaming industry. Before we start, can we just touch on that number I mentioned, by the way? 7? 7 whole years? What in the flying fuck? This thing has lasted so long, and it has done so incredibly well. I was literally about to turn 13 when the Switch came out. I was a child! And now I am about to turn 20 this year. And the Switch is still going strong. Currently, at the time of me recording this video, the Switch has sold around 140 million units and has just become the best-selling console of all time in Japan. Anyways, I got distracted. Let's dive into the pros and the cons of the Nintendo Switch. Now, obviously, as you all likely know, the biggest pro to the Nintendo Switch is that it doubles as both a home console and a portable system. One thing the Switch offers that most other portable systems in the market don't is insanely accessible multiplayer anywhere you go. Now let's get into the library here, because there are a lot of things I want to mention. First off, Nintendo has been firing at all cylinders representing almost every franchise. Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Kirby, Metroid, Splatoon, Yoshi, Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, Animal Crossing, and many, many more. Honestly, there are very few franchises that Nintendo has yet to represent on the Switch. We even got a new F-Zero, kinda sorta, with F-Zero 99. And even Wii Sports got a freaking sequel on the Nintendo Switch. Now, not all of these are the best quality, but when you consider the sheer amount of quality titles on the Nintendo Switch, that alone makes the decision of buying a Switch a no-brainer. Not to mention, the majority of major first-party Wii U titles have been brought over to the Switch. And the system offers plenty of legacy games through the online service. And by the way, I will be touching on the online service later, don't you worry. Anyway, we have plenty of indie titles to talk about here. If you think about it, indie titles, not even just on the Switch in general recently, have been absolutely amazing. And while a lot of these indie titles I'm about to talk about aren't exclusive to the Switch, the sheer output of quality games made by indie teams is not something that can be ignored. Some that come to mind when indie games are brought up is stuff like Bloodstained, Neon White, Cadence of Hyrule, Hades, Heave Ho, Amori, Cult of the Lamb, and plenty more. And like I said, some of those are also available on other platforms, but for me personally, the Switch is the platform I think of when those games get brought up. Now when it comes to major third parties, that's where things get a bit iffy. Looking at the big AAA third party games, stuff like The Witcher, Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Hellblade, Skyrim, Hogwarts Legacy, and other big AAA titles, they don't usually have the best track record on Switch. While stuff like Doom, Doom Eternal, and Hellblade all run fine, they don't really look the best and will always be the inferior versions. But you could get by with only having those games on Switch. A lot of these big third-party AAA games, they either just run poorly or resort to cloud versions if they're going to be on Nintendo Switch, and neither of those are fun. Every time I play either a big AAA game on Switch or a cloud version of a game, I just feel like I've done something wrong in life. Like, how did I get to this point to where I'm playing Resident Evil 8 cloud version? Now, to tie into that point, obviously the Nintendo Switch is severely underpowered, so that is one of the main cons of the Switch. It's most comparable to the Xbox 360 power-wise, so comparing that level of power to the current gen systems, yeah, it's like night and day. Now, that isn't the full story when it comes to third-party games. Obviously, there are tons of third-party games that run just fine and are optimized for the platform. Companies like Atlas have been supporting the platform with stuff like Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, and Catherine Full Body, stuff like that. Square Enix has been supporting the Switch with Dragon Quest, Octopath Traveler, Live Alive, and an ulcer. The Switch definitely isn't lacking in third-party support, and it has a lot of third-party games that also run fine. It's not just the poorly running third-party games like The Witcher and Hogwarts. Now, you may be wondering, what are my favorite games on the Nintendo Switch? Well, mine definitely aren't the usual answer. My favorite game on the Switch, and it is exclusive to the platform, is Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now, before all the SMT fans come at me for picking that specific game in the series to be my favorite, and also for it to be my favorite Switch game, and for it to also be my top 5 favorite games of all time, that's besides the point. Let me just explain myself here. Shin Megami Tensei 5, while it was well received, it wasn't a shockingly amazing game. It just didn't seem to evolve the series a crazy amount. It definitely did some new things, but nothing mind-blowing from what I can gather. From what I've noticed, if you ask a Shin Megami Tensei fan what game they like the most, they will likely tell you a different game in the series. Now, I could very well be completely wrong on everything I just said there. This is coming from someone who briefly heard the opinions of Shin Megami Tensei 5 from the online community, and considering the only SMT game I've finished is the 5th one, and I've only played a few hours of 3 and 4, I could be completely wrong here. But correct me if I'm wrong, SMT fanbase. I'd love to, be corrected on this and to learn what you guys actually think about SMT 5. My second favorite game is probably a bit less controversial of a pick, and that being Metroid Dread. While I played Metroid here and there before Dread's release, Metroid Dread was the first Metroid game I finished to completion, and I loved every second of it. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but let's discuss the online service, Nintendo Switch Online. When the Switch first launched, online play was completely free. But those servers that were used for online play were definitely not the best. Nintendo had announced an online service slated to launch on September 18th, 2018. And it was also announced that that online service would cost money past that point, and that you would no longer be able to play online for free. And obviously that's not the best thing to hear. Upon the launch of Nintendo Switch Online, it wasn't really that great. The online servers were not updated, so the quality did not improve, really. And all that was offered as part of this new service was cloud saves for select games, and a selection of NES games available for free through the service. That wasn't ideal. People were essentially paying for the same poor online service that was previously free, just with some NES games thrown in. As time went on, SNES games were added for free to the service, and more games for the NES were added. The value at that point was better, considering it only costs $20 a year for all that. People definitely still wanted more to be added to the service, specifically more games and console libraries to be offered on the service. Later on, Nintendo would actually go to announce the expansion pack for the online service, which would have a drastic price increase of $50 a year. Now, as a part of that expansion, you got N64 and Sega Genesis games as well. And over time, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, and DLC for a bunch of select games like Animal Crossing, Splatoon, Mario Kart, they would all be included in the expansion pack for free. Making the decision to buy a Switch now, and deciding if it would be worth it, just keep in mind that you do have to pay for online service, and keep in mind what you get from each tier, the normal one and the expansion pack. Nintendo did also make a few retro-styled controllers for the Switch, exclusive to Nintendo Switch Online users, which I have to admit are kinda cool. Speaking of controllers, let's move on to the controllers, starting with the Tic Tacs. Sorry. Wrong line, I meant the Joy-Cons. Don't get me wrong, the Joy-Cons are very impressive controllers, being detachable from the system, gyro aiming, HD rumble, and all that fitting on something that is that small is very impressive. However, that is just the issue. These Joy-Cons are just way too small. Now the Pro controller, on the other hand, whew, wow, now that's a good controller. Feels very high quality, very premium, and everything about it just melts in your hand. Moving on to the hardware itself, there are 3 main versions of the Switch. The standard Switch from launch, the Lite, and the OLED Switch. And if you had to choose one, definitely go with the OLED, as it is better than the other models in every way possible. One issue the standard Switch and the Lite had was storage. They only had 32 gigabytes of storage on the console. Unless you were to get a micro SD card, which most people do, you were definitely low on storage, and it made buying digital games a lot more annoying, especially if there are bigger games like Tears of the Kingdom or any of the major third parties I mentioned earlier like Witcher, Hogwarts, all those. The OLED model, however, doubles that storage capacity, coming with 64 gigabytes of internal storage. And while 64 gigabytes of internal storage still isn't amazing, it's nothing to write home about, it is definitely a lot better than what the base Switch model offered. OLED models can be pricey at the moment, so if that's too much for you and you had to go for a different model, then definitely choose the standard model as opposed to the Lite. The main drawback of the Lite is that it restricts you to portable mode only. There is no way at all to display the Switch Lite on the TV. It doesn't work with any HDMI cables, and it does not work with the Switch dock. Now, moving on from that topic, is it still worth it to buy a Nintendo Switch in 2024 after everything I've just talked about? Yes, I would say it is. The Switch has been in the market for almost 7 years now, which is crazy. Which means it is almost time for Nintendo to announce their next system. While it's likely the next Nintendo system is going to be backwards compatible, so the argument could be made to just wait until the next one comes out. Honestly, there's so many good Nintendo Switch games out right now, and odds are you're going to be able to transfer your save data. I'd say just get a Switch now if you really want one, and you can just probably move your save data over. Now, that's only if you have a strong desire to play a Nintendo Switch game right now. If you're just casually wanting to play a few games, I'd say, it's not that big of a deal to just wait until the next system comes out, instead of buying a console now and then next year buying another console. But if you really are wanting to play Nintendo Switch games right now, go for it. Your Nintendo Switch library is very likely to be backwards compatible on the next system, so you'll probably still be able to have all your data. I'd say go for it. To close the video out, the Switch has been amazing these past 7 years. It has offered an amazing library covering almost every genre, and all of these games being also portable. Thank you, Nintendo. You may piss me off and make questionable decisions quite frequently, but you gave us an incredible system. And in my opinion, if the Nintendo Switch were to end right now, with the current library we have, I would be so happy with what we have gotten on it. Alright, video's over. Go back to watching Mr. Beast or Mark Rober or someone more entertaining. I'm honestly surprised you even watched a video this long. Okay, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.